Hi everyone, and very welcome to this first event on the Nordic Pavilion at COP28. I'm very honored to be here with you to have this very important discussion on youth inclusion in UNFCCC. My name is Lise Coermann, and I'm the Danish youth delegate to UN on climate and biodiversity. And I think that right now we are here at a very critical point dealing with climate issues. I think that's very clear for all of us. And I hope that in this panel it's also very clear that we need to act fast, and the involvement of young people is not just a good idea, but as necessary. Young people are not just the leaders of the future, they are the leaders of right now. Young people bring fresh ideas, energy, and a strong commitment to making things better. They are on the front lines of climate impacts, making changes in all of our communities and pushing for crucial action. Therefore, I think that ignoring the voices of the youth is not anymore an opportunity. In this event, with our DL panel, we will explore why involving young people is not just a good thing, but something that we must do. Let's together understand how young people can be included in the crucial processes happening here at COP. I look forward to this great discussion that we have ahead of us. And I wanted to start by thanking our panel for coming. And let's begin this important conversation with some opening remarks of all of you. So I would like you to share your experiences with youth involvement in UNFCCC. Jasmin, do you want to go ahead? Maybe say a bit about yourself and your role of being here at COP.
Hello, thank you for having me. So my name is Jasmin. I'm the Austrian youth delegate. And we have quite a big program. So we have two youth delegates, the junior youth delegate. That's me, and David is also here. And we also have two seniors that are mentoring us. And we also have two communications experts that are covering social media. And this year we're also financing a person from Global South, so Ibiso. And yeah, it's quite a big program, actually the biggest one in the EU. And our role is, we're officially part of the delegation, so we are having regular meetings with our delegation and also with Austrian politicians. And we're also doing a lot of media work, so doing interviews in press and covering social media, and also meeting with civil society and youth representatives from Austria and from all over the world.
Thank you very much. And then to you, Ibiso.
Nice being here. Thank you so much. My name is Ibiso Ikiroma-Owiye from Nigeria. I'm actually the focal person for the Global South, sponsored by the Climate Austria team. Excited to be here. I'm actually the chairperson, partnership and public relations lead of the Commonwealth Ocean Youth Working Group under the Commonwealth Secretariat. I'm also the executive director of Grassroots to Global Sustainable Development Network in Nigeria, where we carry out grassroots actions, teach people about climate change and actually try to bridge the gap in marginalization of rural communities who have not had light for over a decade, by giving out solar lamps to the students and then possibly creating solar hubs very soon. And then I also work with YSDN, which is a Youth Sustainable Development Network, where we implement projects around energy, and we also implement projects around climate education, incorporating climate education into our curriculum in Lagos, Nigeria. And then, of course, we also do things around on sustainability as well. And yesterday we were invited to the dinner with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, where we had a conversation on loss and damage and phasing out fossil fuels. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And to you, Maria?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. And thanks so much for inviting me as well. My name is Maria Sammuelsen, and I am the head of delegation, the chief negotiator from Denmark. And we've been, I have the pleasure of Lise and Markus in my delegation and my delegation meetings in the morning. And we appreciate that cooperation very much. In the Danish team, we've had youth delegates for quite a while. And I was also previously a part of the negotiations team working on climate finance, and remember having youth delegates along in the negotiations to provide both kind of an exchange of views and ping pong a little about how we see the negotiations, but also experiencing it for the first time as well. This was when I started in the team. It was one of the first jobs I had, and for me, coming into this framework, so from a personal experience, quite overwhelming. So I remember having youth delegates there who also perhaps had a bit of the same experience, and we could share on that as well. So thanks so much for having me, and looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you, Maria. And yeah, I agree. I think we have a really good collaboration in the Danish delegation. That's very nice.
I'm not asking you to say that.
Yeah, so thanks to all of you for sharing a bit about your roles. And as we can hear, you all have quite some experience with youth engagement in UNFCCC. But now I would like to dig a dip deeper into why it even is important to have this inclusion. So Ibiso, would you maybe like to start on that? Why do you think it is important to have young people here at COP and representing young people?
Okay, thank you so much once again. I believe young people are the future, and if we must have sustainability achieved, we need the voices of young people, we need the ideas of young people. And so if you look through some of the innovations we have right now when it comes to technological advancement and development as well, we could see that young people are doing so much, coming up with creative ideas on ocean conservation, cleaning up the oceans and the likes of it. Even when it comes to the movements we see on climate change, you see young people at the forefront of the movement, because we are going to be inhabiting Earth, in the longest time. And so it's important to have young people, at the table. It's important to have young people part of the UNFCCC processes, where we get to share our ideas with the UNFCCC and then see how those ideas can be, converted into actions, meaningful actions, that at the long run we can actually achieve what we want when it comes to sustainability. And so as young people, our fresh ideas are very important. And so these people we have right now, we call them the climate elders in Nigeria, and they have a huge role to play when it comes to building our capacity as young people. We may not have all the experiences, but if we must take over from them, which we will be doing, of course, because we are the future, I think they need to incorporate us, or we need to be included in the UNFCCC processes, where we get to build our capacity, gain some hands-on experience, which we will need, to fill in those positions in the coming days. So, of course, as young people, we need to have our ideas out there, and for us to be heard, we need to be also involved. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I think we are a lot of young people here in the room, and of course we all agree that it's very important for us to be involved. But I think it would also be really nice to hear your perspective on this, Maria, because you're a bit of from the other side than what we are.
Yeah, so I think actually I will want to start back in 2019, where we in Denmark had what we now call the climate election. We had an election in Denmark where one of the main topics was climate change. And it ended up in a election result and some results after the election from the new government that were very progressive on the issue of climate. And I think one of the reasons was for the young voices of Denmark, the youth of Denmark, taking the streets, asking for more ambition. And I think, we've had youth delegates as part of the Danish delegation also before that, but I think there was a realization that this involves, we should have known that way before, but it became very apparent that this just involves everyone, and especially the youth. So I think that has led to more engagement and more focus on the inclusion of youth in climate policies in Denmark. We've established a youth council, and we've also continued and keep developing the youth programs and involvement of youth in the UN negotiations. And I think for us it's a two-way street. Of course, I agree very much that the voices and the inputs from the youth is so important, also for our position making. Taking that into account, Denmark and Austria negotiate through the EU, so obviously that's where we get our voices heard in the first place. But having that youth perspective included in the EU positions is so important, and we get that primarily through our youth delegates and our youth engagement. So that's one side, which is very important. The other side, of course, is also that it's also a chance for us to show our youth delegates how we work. How do we meet every morning? How do we coordinate? How does it work with the EU positions? What is the work that we do when we are here? How do we engage with other negotiation groups, the Cartagena Dialogue and the other groups that we are part of. So I think it's kind of a knowledge exchange that goes both ways. At least I hope that's also how our youth delegates see it. And I'm not asking you to respond to that, but yeah.
Okay, then I won't respond to that. Okay, then I would like to ask you, Jasmin, because I think, of course, when we are the youth, we think that we should be involved. But why is it that our generation is more important than the elderly or any other generation?
Well, I completely agree with my speakers before. So youth has always been at the forefront of the climate movement, and we've changed elections, as you said. And still it's young people pushing for climate action. And that's why it's so important to have young people here to make their voices heard and to have young people have a seat at the table. So yeah, and one of the biggest obstacles at the COP is to have a seat at the table, so to be admitted to COP, to even get a badge, and it's really hard for young people. So I believe this, like, one of the biggest pros of being a youth delegate is just having a badge, having a party badge, having access to the negotiation rooms, which most young people don't have. Most of the young people are outside in the green zone or cannot attend COP at all because they don't have badges and they don't have financing, and that's a big problem. So I'm very lucky to be a youth delegate and to be financed by the ministry, to get a badge by the ministry, and to have access to these rooms. And it's also our responsibility to make the voices of young people heard. So we have been meeting with lots of young people in Austria. There was the ALCO, the local conference of youth, where young people put up the demands for climate policies for COP28. And our role is just to amplify these voices, to amplify these demands and to bring them to the negotiators. Because it's just so important to make these voices heard. Because our generation is the one that's going to be most affected by the climate crisis, and we're going to have to deal with the consequences. So yeah, I think that's why it's so important to have youth involved in the UNFCCC process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think most of all in this room would agree on that, so thanks for sharing. And now you digged already a bit into how your program is working and that you are a part of the national delegation, being a youth delegate, and you have this badge to get in almost anywhere, or at least a lot of places. But can you share a bit more about what is the pros and cons of participating as a youth delegate and not as any other structure?
So, as mentioned, logistically, it's easier. It's easier to get in and to have access to information. And this is really important to have these informations. So, we're in exchange with our delegations. We are in the negotiating rooms. We're at plenaries. And we're also doing media work. So, we try to tell people in Austria, and especially young people via social media, what is happening at this COP. What is being negotiated. And I think this is one big probe, and within our delegation we can be really free, we can be really critical also in media, but I know that not all youth delegate programs are this free to speak so freely. And so it depends a lot on politics as well. So we have elections the following year, and we don't know how it's going to be after that, if we can still speak freely to the media, if we can still criticize Austrian climate policies, or if we're constricted in a way. So that's, a bit of downside to this. And also, we're not allowed to take part in demonstrations because we're a part of the official delegation. So this is also something we cannot do. And I think this is why it's so important that the youth delegates are in exchange with youth from civil society, because we have a lot of information, but we cannot do that many actions. So it's really important to have this exchange.
Mm-hmm. And Ibiso, you are here as a youth representative, kind of from the civil society, so a bit with a different role than Jasmin. So what do you think is the pros and cons of participating in the way that you are participating here at COP?
Okay, thank you once again. So for me, as one of the civil society organizations in COP, she has said, a lot of political stuff has to go in. You have to be very, very diplomatic of what you say, because you don't want to go back and someone is like, why did you say that on national TV? And all of that. So we have to be very, very diplomatic of what we say, and we have to be very wise as well, so you can go home, and be free as well. So for me, I think like she said, the challenge of going into the negotiation room, I don't think we're really well represented in negotiation rooms as Africans or young people from the African continent or from the global south. We don't even have, most of us don't have party badges. We have just observer badges, which is a restriction to our input. I talked about how I joined virtually last year, and with COP27, which happened in Egypt, and I was just scrolling through the online pages. I just watch, like we are doing right now, I just watch people have panel sessions, but I couldn't really make input, and I'm here this year, and I'm looking forward to making so much input, but at the same time, there's this restriction to negotiation rooms, to give my recommendations and all of that. But what I also appreciate is the fact that I have these kind of side events where I could talk, and then of course the videos and all can be shared to my country delegations, and also to some radio houses and TV houses who would help amplify what we're talking about right now, and then see how we can have such opportunities, just like Jasmin has talked about, and being sponsored by your country as a delegate. I think that's something I look forward to, that my country does, open up more opportunities for youths to be sponsored, by Nigeria and from the global south to attend such meetings, get their voices heard, and of course bring back some recommendations for the country's growth. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe, Jasmin, can you tell a bit more about this whole process that you two have been in with, that your program is sponsoring Ibiso's program? How has that all worked out for you? How did it come in place?
It's really important to have voices from the Global South included, because we're not only advocating for Austrian youth, but for youth in general, because it affects us all over the globe. And Austria is one of the richest countries in the world, so we have the responsibility also to share this and to bring young voices from the Global South to the table. So I'm really lucky to have you. And, and I believe it's with feminism, there was the first wave of feminism that said we need to bring women to the negotiating table. And then there was the second wave of feminism asking, what kinds of women? And it's the same with youth. So we're still, I think, at some point at the stage that we're saying youth has to be included, but we also need to ask the question, which youth is included? Because there are lots of youth delegate programs within the EU and European countries, richer nations. But a lot of nations in the Global South don't have the money to send even negotiators, that many negotiators. And they don't have the opportunity to send youth delegates as well. And I think that's why it's so important to finance young people from the Global South. But at the same time, there are six Austrian youth delegates, young person from Austria, and only one person from Nigeria. So it's still not balanced yet. And Austria is a really small country compared to Nigeria as well. So we really need to bring the voices from the Global South as well, because we're affected in different ways. So for instance, loss and damage is something that really affects you, but doesn't affect us that much in Austria yet. So that's just one example why it's so important to have young people from the Global South here like you.
Thank you very much for sharing that and giving us some insights in how this all works. In a few minutes, we will open for some questions from the audience, so prepare yourself if you have any. But first, I would like to ask you, Maria, because now you are in this position where you are a big part of the youth delegate program. But what do you think is the pros and cons of that program versus young people being here from the civil society?
Yeah, so I think both groups have a right of their own. I mean, there's no doubt that we need civil society to create the pressure on us negotiators to get our act together and start moving. And I think civil society has an important role to play there. But I think youth delegates, of course, also have to be a bit of an ambassador for this way of working, the multilateral system. And emphasizing that while it might not be perfect, and you definitely don't have to agree with everything that's going on in it, it's still the best tool we have to deal with this issue. And I think that's where youth delegates might find themselves in a bit more of a difficult position, because you might agree with the voices on the street, but you still have to be in the process and kind of play by the process rules. And I can imagine that might be a bit tough being in that position. But I think both dimensions is important, and of course youth delegates can bring those voices inside the negotiations team and start pushing from the inside as well. So I think it works very well together and complements each other in a very good way.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I can say, as a Danish youth delegate, I totally recognize what you're saying, that sometimes it can be a bit hard that we have to represent all the youth of Denmark, because of course that makes it, that we have to say something different than what the civil society can say. So I also think that it's very good that we have both and that we can complement each other, and I think we should be even better and strive even more to have a stronger connection between those two ways of participating here at COP. But now to the audience. Do you have any questions for this dear panel? Mathilde?
One question. So first of all, I'm thinking one of the reasons we have to have youth delegates is because our countries are supposed to represent all of their different groups, right, including youth. But maybe the reason we have to have youth delegates, and the reason that many youth prioritize to go here, like also youth activists and organizations, is because you don't feel enough heard in your national context, right? So I'm wondering a bit if you have any reflections on that. Why is it that youth isn't heard enough, or why is it that our demands, maybe they're listened to, but they're not really done anything about, right? That's why we have to keep coming here. So I'm wondering if you have any reflections on that, like the actual policy changes. And then second of all, one thing is youth, but secondly, we don't see a lot of children here yet. And so how can we represent children and also future generations in a better way?
Repeat the question, please.
Okay, that was a long question. Okay, I can repeat that question, and then for the next question we will give you a microphone, I think. So the question is about that one of the reasons maybe why we have, we as youth need to go to the COP is because we don't feel represented in our national operations, and that we don't feel that we are heard back in our home country, so we need to go here to push. But I think the big question is, how do we represent the children as well? Because now we can see that there is luckily more and more young people attending COP, but how do we represent the children and the ones who are too young maybe to be here? So how can we represent those voices at COP? What do you think, Jasmin?
Okay, so I think I'm gonna cover both questions now. So first, why is youth still not heard? I believe that we're kind of lobbyists for the youth, and we're just lobbying for youth demands like having a livable future. But there are other lobbies as well, like the oil lobby, especially at this conference here. So it's just like, what financial means does the youth have compared to oil lobbies, to meat industry, to other lobbies? And I think that's one problem. So we have morals, we have the right to a future, we have human rights, and this is something, it's really important, but it's just kind of hard to compete with other lobbies. And that's why it's so important to have youth voices represented at the table as well, to have youth negotiators, not only youth delegates that are somewhere in the back, and to have more young people here, and also to have children here, like you said. And I think most people of us, we're still above the age of 18, so we're not really children anymore. And in Austria, it's not possible to become a youth delegate when you're under 18. That's because, a lot of logistical requirements as well. But actually, the day before we had a flight to Dubai, we were at a UNICEF event in Austria, and there were lots of children and young people under 18 that were doing a creativity contest. So there were children at the age of, I think, 6 to 17 years old, and they were drawing paintings and writing texts, performing songs, and most of them were about the climate crisis and how they picture the future. And actually, they gave us a book with all of these paintings and texts, so we brought it here with us. And we always try to remember that these are the voices we really do represent, and it's harder for 6-year-olds to be at a conference. That's clear, but that's why it's important to have youth delegates that are really meeting with youth and having also children's demands heard, because a child might have different demands that a young person that is starting their career maybe. So that's why it's so important to meet with these people and always have it in our minds that these are persons we are representing. And to be at this event, it really gave me a lot of energy, because there's people we are fighting for, future generations.
Maria?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a bit. I mean, I'm not going to speak to whether you feel heard at home, because, I mean, that's obviously up for you to decide if you feel that your national politicians listen to the extent that they should. But I think it's so important, even if you felt heard at home, to keep coming here, because this is a global challenge, and we can only tackle it if we work together. And Denmark represents 0.1% of global emissions. So, I mean, even if we did everything we could in Denmark, it wouldn't make a difference in the global sphere. So we need that push, and we need that. We need. We need people to keep coming and applying that pressure here in at COPs as well, even if national governments are perfect at listening to young people.
Yeah, do you want to share something about Ibiso? Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so you talked about children involvement as well, and I think that's one thing Yongo, which is the youth constituency for UNFCCC, has done so much work on. I think prior to COP, there was this statement for children that we were working on, and I made my contribution to that statement. We were looking at child's rights and all of that, and their inclusion too in the UNFCCC processes. And we discovered that one of the challenges we would have with having them come to COP is how do we manage children, because it's one thing to just bring them here, it's another thing to be sure of their safety, and also guide them, on how to go about amplifying what they want and making their demands as well. So some of the things I thought about during that period was how do we have like a little bit of conference within our region for the children, and then we get their voices via different means, as maybe a video, or maybe as quotes from young people that we could just display when it comes to side events like this, where we have already a screen, and then we could say these are the voices of young people, and these are what they are advocating for. So we may not be able to have all the children on ground, but we could have 1 or 2 representatives of children who would come in with guardians, and then the rest can just, their voices can just be amplified with video slides, and or quotes or picture slides of what they are actually advocating for. And of course, we could also have them write their own statements, which we can help bring, to COP, and then help and see how the leaders, can buy into the ideas of these young people, because truth be told, they are going to be the youths very soon. Most of them are 17 years old, and in the next year they're going to be 18, and of course they will come to COP. So there's this anticipation of we want to come to COP, and we want to also have our voices heard. But right now, what are we doing, or what are they allowing us to do? And so these are the kind of leader conferences we can have in our region to build their capacity, pending when they come to COP. So thank you.
Yeah, and I also think that your question about how we can represent children is a big question for everyone. Like, how do we represent someone who is not here? And that's doesn't only account for children, but also, as you are both saying, that we need more young people from the global south. What can we do to represent them better? Because I think we can never tell their stories. They should be the ones telling their stories. But now that they can't, because they are not allowed here, or maybe children shouldn't be at COP, I don't know. But the system is something quite specific. So how do we take their stories into this room in the best way? And I think it's always about doing it in the most honest way and telling, for example, if you can have a video, I think that's a really good idea, because then you have the children themselves saying the things and not us interpreting what they said and then trying to give it forward. But thank you very much for the question. Do we have other questions from the audience? Wait a second.
Perfect. Yeah, I was thinking about your reflection on last day. We heard that Simon Steele, the executive director for for UNFCCC, he said that it's important to listen to youth, but right now it's us, him or other at his generation that is in power, so it's them who have to do something. I'm wondering if there is an obstacle with youth saying that climate is only our responsibility, or it's something that our generation has, that it's important actually to put both, that it's something that we as youth see as a high demand, but it's not us that are in power right now, and it will not be fixed when we will get in power, so it's them who are in power right now who have to do something. So do we need to have like a change of language to set this as a focus? Yeah, it's just to hear your reflection on his speech.
So who would like to start on that one? Okay, so I think the question is like, because I think Marcus and I both a lot hear, what do you say, like adult people saying, oh, it's so nice that you, the young generation, are taking this issue of climate change on your shoulders, and that you're trying to do something, and that you will be in the forefront and you will be the next generation doing something. But that when you have this language, you're also a bit of like pushing away the responsibility. So for example, my father says that a lot to me, that he's so proud of me doing all of this. And then I'm telling him, yeah, thank you, but when you say that, it also sounds like that he won't do anything. He's just relying on me or our generation doing something. So how can we change that language? Yeah, I think that's part of the question. Yeah?
Maybe I can kick off, and then you can supplement, because I'm sure you have some very good perspectives on this. But I think it's a good point that we shouldn't take responsibility away from the ones in power now. I mean, it's their obligation to act on this, but I think they can do it in a more informed way when we have youth telling the stories and informing on how much they are affected by this. So I think it's not really a matter of taking away responsibility, but making sure that it's informed and it's in a way that also understands the urgency and I mean, you guys are voters in the countries you come from, so or many places. So you also have quite a lot of power, and I think that's also the example that I had from Denmark in the beginning that really showed that there is a certain amount of power in using that voice to also influence the politicians that should make the decisions.
Yeah.
I believe it's important to have the voices of young people heard, but at the end of the day, it comes down to decisions taken. And yeah, it's about power. Who's in power? And as you said, we can change elections. If we just look at the demography in Europe, lots of older people are living there. So yesterday I talked to a person living in Egypt, and she came to Europe for the first time, to Austria and to Germany, and she told me, like, in Egypt everyone's our age, but when I went to Austria there are so many old people on the streets. So yeah, it was crazy for her because yeah, of course, we can vote at the age of 18 or 16 maybe. So there are lots of people that are affected and that still cannot vote, that still cannot make their voice heard, that do not have even the power to vote. And so that is why I believe that sometimes the youth demands are much closer to demands to people from the Global South, because in the Global South, people are way younger. So in average, there are countries where people are 30 years in average or even less. And so still, lots of them are not allowed to vote, so the power lies with older people still. And yeah, it's hard to change that. I wouldn't say let a 60-year-old vote, but at the same time, we need to question those power structures and also question why the power, especially in the global north, in Europe, for example, lies so much with older people, and how young people can make their voices heard and also be included in the decisions taken at the end of the day.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so I think sharing my own perspective, it will be on, you talked about changing the language, which for me, if the power doesn't lie with the young people and it lies with the older people, it would just basically be how do we educate those older people on what is really important for them to vote upon. Because when I read the story of, is it Lise Thunberg, the person who started the movement for Fridays for Future, yeah, and she actually had that challenge, which made her begin the movement. And you saw how she dragged young people into it. And before you know, even the older people began to see reasons on why the movement was really important. So if we cannot be there, in those positions and then vote as well, we could have our older people come into knowledge or come into the light of what we are trying to do. And for us in the global south, especially in Nigeria, what we try to do with these things such as climate education is educating the young ones. And so if we educate the young ones, it's easier for them to educate their parents and their older people at home, because you would keep key into the interest of your young person. So let's say, for example, before I came to COP28, my dad asked me the question of, what are you going to do in COP28? What are you going to do in Dubai? And I tried so hard to look for the simplest way to explain climate change and all of that to him in a way he would understand. Though he worked with the ministry for a while, and he had knowledge about the MDGs, that was the Millennium Development Goals, but he didn't really see the transition into the SDGs because he left the office and all of that. So I had to look out for the best possible language, to explain to him what climate change and what it is all about. And by so doing, I have influenced his mindset on what it is. And I believe when he goes into some rooms to have some discussions or some negotiation, he would see it in the light to which I have explained it to him. And he will also be acquainted with the reality of it, because explaining it to him in a way where he can relate to the changes around his environment and how it impacts him and impacts us as his children as well, and the entire society. I think that's the first way to go about it. And then we don't have to crack our heads too much on how they, take up those decisions and make those negotiations, up there in the political parties and in the political room. So I think that's one way to change the language structure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And I also think that even though I totally agree with what you say, Jasmin, that in Europe our generation is quite small. We don't, we're not that many young people compared to how many adult or old people there is. I think that we can still affect them a lot. I remember during the last election in Denmark, the Green Youth Movement had a big campaign where they tried to convince all young and children to talk with their parents and their grandparents about their fears and how they see the future with climate change, because they thought that even though you can't vote, you can affect a lot of other people. And I think it will always affect a grandmom, mother more when it comes from their grandchildren, instead of coming from IPCC or something else. It always affects us more when we know the person, we can see the sadness in their eyes. So I think we should remember that we can affect a lot of people. But now we are coming to an end. And I think that we have all agreed that it's a good idea to have youth inclusion in UNFCCC. I'm happy for that. But I would like to ask each of you if you should give one tip for others to how we can enhance the youth inclusion and have more young people here and maybe more youth delegate programs in Europe and in Global South. How can we do that? Do you have one tip for others that they can try to follow for that? Ibiso, please go ahead.
Okay, so I think one of the things I would suggest, or I would say, is the fact that private sectors and even governing bodies need to have youth programs, and an advisory youth council for the young people. We see that happen with some country. For us in Nigeria, we have the Dutch consulate, we have the Netherlands consulate, and most of them are already having this youth advisory council where we have a focal person who talks with the youths across different civil society organizations and NGOs, and then reports back to them on the pressing needs of the young people and their recommendations and solutions to some of the climate change issues we have. And so if we have such programs, programs, or if we have such advisory council, by these private sectors or governing bodies, it helps to include youths, into what they do, into the activities, and into sustainability as a whole. I think that's one way to have youths included. Thank you.
Thank you. And to you, Maria, I think, for example, if there's someone sitting out there looking online and then they are from a European country or another country not having youth delegate programs, how can they affect the prosperity of having that in the future?
So I think a lot of this comes with having a good dialogue with the responsible ministry and asking these questions. And I think that's also how it started. In Denmark, it's primarily through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who have then brought it out to other ministries. And I think having an ambassador in a ministry kind of pushing for this is really helpful. But I think I was actually quite struck with the point made on this not being very representative in the UNFCCC, and perhaps there should be some room for looking at how we can organize it in the UNFCCC process, perhaps to include youth in a different way. I mean, it could be through the UNFCCC Secretariat or something that also funds participation from developing countries. So perhaps it should be more organized, really, to make sure that everyone is represented on an equal basis.
Yeah, thank you, because we can see that there's a lot of European youth and not as much from the Global South. So I think there's a big problem with the financial situation, who can afford to bring youth delegates and who can't. What would your best tip be, Jasmin?
So I believe in a national level, it's important to include youth, for instance, via national youth councils, to have youth delegate programs, and also to have the youth delegate programs include people from the Global South, because we're the ones having the financial means to do so. So I think this would be really important, especially for the national delegations, to advocate for that. And also on a European level. So this year, for the first time, we have European youth demands. So what we proposed is that every European country has youth delegates. We've proposed that before, and actually, in fact, some countries have youth delegate programs for the first time this year, like Germany, Slovakia, Slovenia, for instance. So I think this helps, and by 2025, it would be really good for every European country to have youth delegate programs, and ideally including people from the Global South as well. And on the international level, I think it would be important for the UNFCCC to give badges to young people, more badges to young people, have a quota, and also finance that. So financing for youth inclusion just needs to rise in order so that we can participate meaningfully.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the tips and all your great insights and the good questions from the audience. Now I would like to conclude this session. I hope that we all learned something new and that we will work the next 2 weeks to strengthen the voice of the youth. Thank you very much.